Nostalgic fans of Resident Evil might remember a few years ago in July 2015 when gameplay footage was revealed for a fan project called Resident Evil 2 Reborn. This demo was revealed on YouTube. Released merely as a proof of concept, it showed a Leon Kennedy model that looked like it was ripped right from RE4, stiffly walking through the dark streets of Raccoon City. This would go on to surpass 1 million views and began to spark serious excitement for what could potentially be a dream come true for longtime fans of the Resident Evil series. The fan project was being produced by a small Italian team that went by the name Invader Games at the time. The plan was to remake Capcom's 1998 classic in the Unreal 4 engine. However, it didn't take long for followers of the project to find that a non-profit RE2 remake by Invader Games was not to be. The studio was contacted by Capcom and asked to pull the plug on their project a month after it was revealed on YouTube. Understandably, this was due to Capcom already having their own plans to make a Resident Evil 2 remake, which would go on to release earlier this year in January. When Invader Games was contacted by Capcom, something unexpected happened. Although they were being asked by Capcom to cease their work on RE2 Reborn, Capcom took sincere interest in the indie devs and commended them on the project. Capcom, hoping to meet the small team, invited them to their development studio in Osaka, Japan. It was during this visit when they were able to speak with several key figures at Capcom whom gave advice and valuable insight into game development. They were also lucky enough to see progress on the official RE2 remake Capcom was making and to get a glimpse at Resident Evil 7, which was nearing its release. This visit appeared to spark a lot of brainstorming and idea sharing between both studios. And while RE2 Reborn was officially dead, this meeting gave a small team of 10 the blessing of a legendary developer whose games fueled their inspiration. Something notably rare in the game industry. It was this meeting that was the catalyst for Invader Games' future ambitions as the team moved on to their next project. Fast forward a couple of years to the present, and Invader Games, now known as Invader Studios, have released their first commercial game, Daymare, 1998. Daymare 1998 is a survival horror third-person shooter that runs on the Unreal 4 engine, releasing on the Xbox One, PS4, and PC. Considering Invader Studios' history, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Daymare borrows heavily from the Resident Evil franchise. From the over-the-shoulder shooting and limited resources to the characters and settings, there isn't a lot of originality to be found here, though that shouldn't dissuade you. Daymare has some value if you're in the market for a similar experience, but it really depends on how forgiving you can be to its missteps, which there are plenty of.
Now get in there and show us what you're made of. That hell is truly the House of Hades.
Hey, Major. You looking to lose the payload now that we're so close to base?
The game starts off with you playing as Hades operative Agent Leave. Leave is tasked with entering a facility where a bioweapon called Pollux has been released in order to obtain samples. After the mission, Leave betrays the crew on a helicopter and escapes with the Pollux sample. The helicopter, which is carrying canisters of the virus, crashes into the nearby mountain town of Keensight, infecting the populace. This sets up the plot, and from here you go on to play as Sam, a Keensight resident who has an unexplained mental disorder that causes him to have hallucinations, and one of the helicopter pilots named Raven, who's trying to reunite with another pilot.
What the hell happened? I'm still alive.
The story is quite the mess. This is in large part due to some terrible writing that could have used a second pass over. The characters are somewhat bland, and while most of them are competently voiced, others struggle to explain their intentions and convey emotions in a natural way. Sam has to be the worst offender of this. The game wants you to feel bad for him by having you witness his wife being killed, but the guy voicing him has an emotional range of Tommy Wiseau, and it makes the setup of his character not very compelling.
This is all my fault. I'm so fucking stupid.
During one instance that has Sam bargaining with another character, both characters are voiced and written like complete psychopaths with no reasoning ever given. This stuff is just littered all throughout the narrative. Dialogue is often over and under exaggerated or just grammatically incorrect sometimes.
The Sacred Heart Hospital. He's going there. And then he'll be there.
This makes some of the cutscenes difficult to follow and take seriously. Although they are serviceable enough to establish where you need to be going when it's time to play again, there's a lot to be desired to how the story is presented. Many important things like the initial outbreak happen completely off screen without a clear indication of the effect. which will leave you scratching your head when you've eventually come to realize what has happened. It's up to your imagination to fill in some of the holes. Secondary subplots and character backstory are never given an explanation or are just forgotten about. And just about every device the story uses to deepen the plot and intertwine the arcs of the three main characters contributes to a very eye-rolling twist that exists only to patch up every hole in the story.
I know. So many innocent lives lost to save just one.
Daymare models its gameplay off the third-person shooting that Resident Evil and survival horror games of the likes have been recycling for the last decade and a half. No matter what character you play as, movement is slow and ammo is scarce. Ammo conservation is key, much like RE Remake, giving you a reason to search every nook and cranny to keep up a steady supply of lead. Since ammo is hard to come by, and falling back on melee combat isn't ideal, avoidance becomes a viable tactic. Zombies are plentiful and they can take a significant bite out of your health if you let them get too close. You often need to find ways to run around zombies so you can save ammo. While playing as Sam, some zombies appear as visions and won't cause you to take damage if they grab hold of you. However, there's no indication between a real zombie and a hallucination, so when you waste a bullet on one, it feels cheap. There are only a couple of weapons in the game, but each of them provide an appropriate kick and are satisfying to use. The shotgun in specific feels great to use as a single shell will launch a zombie on its back, which can be a very useful tactic in tight corridors. Interestingly, Daymare adopts a similar reloading mechanic to Insurgency Sandstorm. Weapons that use magazines have two methods of reloading: a quick reload in which you'll drop your magazine on the ground even if it has ammo in it, or a tactical reload that takes significantly longer where you'll fit the magazine back into your inventory and replace it with another. It's a nice touch that gives the gunplay a little bit more depth, but newcomers to the system might find it a bit confusing how the inventory handles this mechanic at first. Magazines have to be loaded from ammo boxes, so you'll be spending a lot of time in the inventory screen, which can get annoying when you're doing it after every encounter. Fairly competent puzzles are scattered through the 5 chapters that will test your short-term memory, but nothing that should require you to look up a walkthrough. Most of them are straightforward and help break up the pacing. All your inventory is accessed by the DID, Data Interchangeable device, that each character wear on their wrists. From here you can listen to tape logs, read over notes you found, and combine items together. There's nothing especially inventive here, but it's handled adequately, and seeing your inventory in real time means you have to consider preparation before rushing into an area. In addition to standard zombies, Hexacore has engineered other special variants that act as mini-bosses to keep you on your toes. While they do give a bit of variety to the combat, none of them are very interesting to fight. They require a serious amount of ammo to put down, making it hard to justify fighting them unless they're in an area you need to be in. Some sequences lock you into fighting these special types of enemies, and they really just amount to you running away to a safe distance, turning around, and shooting. As much as I wanted to like these encounters, they were very mentally taxing.
This hasn't afflicted the entire town.
While Daymare doesn't do much to inspire in terms of narrative, it's not the same story when it comes to the presentation. Daymare is glistening with the same tone and atmosphere of Resident Evil thanks to its proficient use of the Unreal 4 engine. Textures are startling with clarity and complemented by reflective qualities thanks to the engine's dynamic lighting system. The lighting is used especially well and helps give a sense of foreboding when the zombies alone can't quite get the job done. The detail found in the various environments is also quite commendable. While indie games today are littered with reused assets, Daymare keeps things fresh. During my playthrough, I stopped multiple times to scan over the handcrafted interiors. Although we never witness any of Keensight's inhabitants, the world feels like it was previously lived in. An interesting gimmick is how the game takes advantage of its time period with the creative use of CRT monitors that you'll have to interface with to solve puzzles. Other than that though, there isn't much significance to the 1998 time period the game takes place in. There are some pretty hilarious Easter eggs and callbacks to 90s pop culture, but besides that, this game could have been called Daymare 2019, and it would have been the same experience.
HQ, Agent Liev here. Do you receive me? Over.
Daymare's score is somewhat hit or miss, with some tracks feeling like they belong more in a rave club than a survival horror title. But more often than not, the music adds to the strength of some of Daymare's more tension-filled encounters. Audio is handled very well with some impressive mixing and variety of effects. In one instance specifically, the ambience and cries in one of Sam's hallucinations was enough to give me literal chills, if not only for a few moments. There are some aspects of the presentation that could improve. Some animations are very stiff, and certain character models look like they're gazing into the abyss, but they get the job done. It doesn't exactly have the same production quality of the Resident Evil 2 remake, but that's a pretty fair expectation.
I accomplished my mission at the first light of dawn, and for once in my existence, the best plan was to not have a plan.
It's not common for an indie game to deliver on as much of its promise as Daymare 1998. It's stunning on a technical level, and checks all the boxes that a survival horror title needs. Although it pales in comparison to the franchise it pays so much homage to. If the price was cut in half, it might have been a different story, but for $30 USD, it's hard to recommend. Certain aspects of the gameplay aren't very intuitive, and the story is abysmal, even by Resident Evil standards. There is an average 10-hour single-player experience here, but some extra modes would have been nice, as there isn't much in the way of replay value. Hopefully, post-launch, we can get some extra features. The efforts of Invader Studios should be recognized, and I hope if we get a Daymare in 1999, it can stand shoulder to shoulder to its father franchise, instead of waning in its shadow.
Sorry to disappoint you, kid. I guess the Great Sandman ain't so great after all. But after all of the lives lost, at least I managed to save one.